teenage foreign fighter stepped out of a nightmare and into the dusty road before us. Turbaned, angry, he stared into our car with a gun in one hand, jabbing a finger in repeated accusation with the other, long hair falling over his shoulders, his voice a tumble of loathing. "ISIS," murmured our interpreter, and the very word seemed to suck the oxygen out of the vehicle. It confirmed that we had just unwittingly driven into the hands of the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, a foreign-led jihadi group fighting in Syria that was already infamous for abducting Westerners as hostage. The omens were already bleak. It was Friday, the 13th of September last year, during my 13th assignment to Syria for the Times. It was a few minutes more before my interpreter spoke to me again, by which time more ISIS fighters had appeared beside the car, every bit as hostile as the first, their mood caught between anger and delight at finding a British journalist so suddenly in their hands. "Iraqis, they want to take us to their Islamic court for investigation," my interpreter said quietly, pale-faced. "One of them wants to shoot us as spies." The autumn sun suddenly seemed unbearably hot, and I felt the first drip of sweat break from my hairline and run down my face. A worst-case scenario was on the edge of becoming reality. We looked at a field to our right, murmuring between us that it could be our best chance of escape for the next year or two, while in the front seat, unseen by the fighters around us, our young Syrian driver eased his leg off a concealed submachine pistol. There was so much that could go wrong. So I thought I was done for, but fortune did not completely abandon me. I had another contingency plan. It would be crass to reveal the details here, other than to say that some very influential Syrians, to whom I am eternally grateful, negotiated my passage out of what seemed like a certain abduction scenario. But I never went back. After 13 visits to northern Syria across the span of 2 years, and an intense emotional and professional investment in the story, I simply stopped going. The ascendancy of Islamic radicalism and the terrible rate of abduction among the small cadre of reporters who ventured into the rebel zones meant that I could no longer justify the risks. The aim of any war correspondent is to survive and report. In Syria, after my Friday the 13th encounter with ISIS, I no longer saw that aim as likely achievable. A few days prior to the incident, a Spanish correspondent disappeared near Syria's fourth city, Hama. Days later, 2 other Spanish reporters were seized by ISIS in Raqqa. 4 French reporters, including an old friend, Didier Francois, were abducted in separate incidents in June and July. In October 2013, a 3-man team from Sky News Arabia were captured near Aleppo. A month later, 2 Swedish freelancers were also abducted. American journalist Austin Tice and another friend, James Foley, had already been taken much earlier, seized in different locations in 2012. This is not the full tally. At least 3 other Western reporters are missing, their identities masked at their families' request. 8 foreign reporters have been killed since the war began in 2011. The last, experienced Iraqi cameraman Yasser Faisal al-Jumaili, was murdered by ISIS in December after being stopped at a checkpoint near the Turkish border. Since then, the flow of foreign journalists into rebel-controlled areas of the country, never more than a dribble at best, has stopped altogether. As a result, public awareness, which needs constantly to be refreshed and updated of change, has ossified, handing a golden card to the regime. The ensuing conflict has become a war without real people in the eyes of most Westerners, who now regard the Syrian civil war as an alien versus predator type contest, complete with severed heads, flayed skids, and bitten hearts, in which jihadis compete with the regime as centre stage for Western fears. They seem to be winning. The regime, for all its ruthlessness and blood-soaked cruelty, are beginning to look the lesser of 2 evils in the eyes of foreign nations more terrified of Islamic terrorism than authoritarian barbarity. Missing from this narrative is a key entity. The millions of Syrian civilians, the nation's appalled majority, have had their voice effectively stolen by the absence of journalists. It is their word that is the most powerful in reminding the world of what is truly being lost and endured in Syria's post-revolutionary war. It is they who should toll the bells to forgotten conscience. The most powerful man I ever met in Syria was an impoverished 27-year-old car mechanic called Yasser Yunus. Gassed by a regime sarin shell that had bounced down his stairwell in Aleppo in April last year, killing his wife and children months before the large-scale gas attack in Damascus, Yunus's detailed testimony, backed by samples taken from the attack site and tested in Porton Down, went around the world, throwing down the gauntlet to President Obama, challenging the presidential will behind the red line threat made earlier to Assad over the use of chemical weapons. This one man's experience of a life carelessly ruined between a regime few liked and a rebel force few invited epitomised that of the Syrian everyman. His voice was pure and his intent innocent. By speaking to a journalist, he indirectly spoke truth to power and revealed the US threats as empty posturing. That the British Parliament and President Obama so studiously avoided intervening on the behalf of Yunus and his extended clan of innocent victims in Syria is one matter. It would be an even greater shame if, through the absence of independent reporting in so much of Syria, we now choose to forget altogether such people exist, normal Syrians, and believe instead the simplistic cardboard cutout image of a war fought between rebel thugs, extremist hoods, and regime goons. This is Anthony Loyd of The Times for The World Today.